And so let me just share with you all a little bit about our current approach and how we could really use some tweaks in order to not feed into that restrictive eating cycle, as Dr. May has taught us that seems to actually be the other side of binge eating. And the more we try to control and the more we restrict, we may actually cause physiological and psychological factors that leads us to want to have more cravings, overeat, ruminate about food more. And I think that aspect was really enlightening. And so I wanted to really share that with you all. So for those of you who haven't met me, my name is Tyann. I am a therapist in Oklahoma, and I am a certified TEAM-CBT trainer as well. And why I wanted to learn more about the treatment of binge eating is I used our traditional TEAM-CBT habits and addictions treatment process for two of my clients who came to me for the treatment of depression and anxiety. And then we found out that they also binge eat. And the treatment process truly fell flat. And I wasn't sure why, because it works so well for treating drinking, treating so many of the other habits that I treated, like Xanax use. And so I really wanted to know why. And learning more about Dr. May's program through our registered dietitian who's on our panel today, I think really gave me the missing pieces to make this treatment approach a lot more effective. And we just ran our first binge eating group, and we had 75% success rate. So it's better than the 0 that I had. It wasn't for everyone, but 3 out of our 4 participants went from severe binge eating down to no or slightly on the binge eating scale, which I thought was really incredible and inspiring how life-changing the program was. And so one of the tools that you all know that we use for motivation is the triple paradox. And currently, it really only addresses the binge eating process. It talks about what are the advantages of binge eating? What are the costs of change? What makes it hard to change? And then it talks about the core values. So continuing to binge eat shows I really care about not suffering or me time, but it's only addressing one side of the process, right? And what I think we could do to improve that when we address motivation is to look at the benefits and values of binge eating, but really address what are the benefits and values of restrictive eating. Because when I binge eat, there's often, in our participants we see, there's a process of really wanting to compensate through restriction after a binge. I shouldn't eat for the rest of the week, or I should just not eat all day so I can binge eat at night. There's always plans to restrict after a binge, and that seems like a missing piece that we haven't addressed in our current approach. And then looking at the cost of change is the cost of changing both of these cycles in this process, right? So we can revise the triple paradox, I think, to more fully address the whole process there. And these are just some examples that we got from our group participants. What are the benefits of binge eating? Helps me to escape, numb out. It's exciting. We had a woman who said, I'm fine throughout the week, but the weekend, that Friday, is so exciting because I'm planning for, it's a party all weekend. And that's my me time to escape from the stresses of work, from loneliness, whatever else. Then we look at the benefits of restrictive eating, all of them really related to, I feel this sense of high. When I'm in control, I feel powerful. I only ate that piece of chicken breast and a salad and drank water all day, and I have this really high self-esteem about myself. And so we started to see that process is kind of powerful too. The binge is rewarding, but the restriction is actually also highly rewarding as we were processing it with our participants. And these were some of their answers for the cost of change as well. It's scary to try something new. Could this mindful eating approach be like another diet where I could risk failure? And if I'm changing this coping skill or this form of escaping, I'm going to have to face my problems and have to feel my feelings. And so this is just an example of how to break down that tool with the actual answers. And then, as you all know, we voice the resistance in order to have them come up with their good reasons of why would you want to change, considering all of these powerful benefits of your current patterns, of the current binge eating restriction as well. Okay, so we'll voice the resistance. They tell us why they would want to change. And we also want to address the powers of the restrictive eating, not just the binge eating or overeating aspects, right? And as you all know, if you've taken my habits and addictions course, we put those good reasons to change in a motivation script that they can really look at on a regular basis, because motivation will ebb and flow through this change process. So we had our participants also have a motivation script of why do I want to change? Why do I want to not only stop binge eating, but also restrictive eating and yo-yo dieting? And one piece that I've pulled in from my ACT training is they talk about when we look at motivation, carrots are much more powerful than sticks. So sticks are what they use to punish themselves, right? Like, oh, if I continue to do this, I'm going to die early. I'm going to get diabetes. That's a stick motivation statement. It seems to create some change, but it's very temporary. And it often creates actually more guilt and shame for people in the long run. So it isn't as effective as a carrot statement in their motivation script, where we really want to craft more carrots. I want a quality of life where I can feel healthy and freely travel with my daughter. And that's what matters to me. And that's what drives me to change towards having more balance and letting go of these extreme cycles of eating. Right? So shifting those carrot statements into shifting that stick language into more of carrots is often more effective for motivation to change. Now, I want you all to also think of our habits and addiction log. We're seeing that control is the problem, not the solution. And you see that right column on our habits and addiction log is replacing their tempting thoughts with self-control thoughts. And as I got training in this program, I realized that may actually feed into this need to continue to control and restrict and control my food and just quench my temptation. And so what we saw in our group is we changed self-control thoughts to just wise thoughts. Wise thoughts have truth, but they also have compassion. And let me see where we're at on time. I want to make sure we have enough time for our panel as well. And let me just go over how to tweak a couple of other tools, and then we'll head straight into the Q&A. Okay, you all know the devil's advocate as that role play that can be really powerful in connecting with the tempting part of them, and then working to shift from the temptation, right? So the current setup of the devil's advocate is they choose a specific food item, like donuts is the example that Dr. David Burns has used. The therapist takes on that tempting voice, and then the client talks back to it. They're like, oh, eat that donut. It looks really good. And the client may say, no, I shouldn't eat that. I can just walk away. Why this may be problematic from what we've learned is it then ends up like villainizing a specific food group, like donuts are bad, sweets are bad. It gets on that forbidden food list. And a lot of the responses that our clients give actually reinforce restrictive thinking and eating as well. And so the revised process can be just addressing the behaviors of both the behaviors of binging and the behaviors of restricting. And I think that will be overall more effective for long-term change. So what's the temptation to engage in that behavior? And so some of the new tempting thoughts would be, so if you're the therapist sharing that thought and then they talk back to it, you may say, you should binge right now in order to escape. And then we had our participants say, yeah, it's fun to do that. And it does work to help me escape, but I actually want long-term change. And then the sample tempting thought for restriction. So we want to keep in mind that we're addressing both is you should really, I'm sorry, the screen is blocking. Yeah, you shouldn't eat for the rest of the day after eating those donuts. We've had participants who mentioned that. And then their response can be a bit more balanced, right? You'll learn a lot more if you look into the training for the mindful eating approach. But the responses are just much more empowering, listening for that restriction, and we really want to take that out of their language. So we had a participant who said, actually, I can eat donuts if I really want them. But I can also do a lot of other things to actually escape and address some of my struggles in a more effective way. So that could be a more effective way of shifting the devil's advocate. Stimulus control currently is like removing food from the home. Like if you're having problems with binging on chips, just remove it from your home. And it seems to have this process of like permanently removing it, right? And it could be problematic because it gives that label of this food's off limit. And as we're learning from Dr. May, that could actually create more cravings for it, more rumination for it. And sometimes initially you may want to do some stimulus control for a very high risk binge food as they're learning the mindful eating process. But our intention is ultimately to bring that food back into the home, bring it back into their diet as they do exposure therapy with that forbidden food while practicing mindful eating and the mindful eating approach in that process. Lastly, I want to bring up the hidden emotion, where you all know this is typically used to treat anxiety for us. What is it that's currently bothering you that you're not addressing? And the moment you sweep it under the rug, your anxiety comes about to tell you something's bothering me that I'm not addressing, right? We actually really saw this in the binge eating group too. When I consulted with Christina, because I had no idea what I was doing with eating disorders, Christina told me that, truly binge eating is really an anxiety disorder. You'll really see that with so many of our binge eating clients. And we truly had a person who the hidden emotion tool, she said, was the key to her binge eating. Because what was really bothering her that she wasn't addressing is a lot of times she was feeling lonely in their marriage. She felt like she should do so many things on her own because she's a strong woman. And she never shared this with her husband. And so as we were exploring, is there something in the moment that's really bothering you that you're not addressing? We continue to find patterns of loneliness and not connecting with her husband. He's overworking and she's not talking about it. And finally, as she started to open up more and share more about that with her husband, and they found a more balance in his work schedule, or even if he's working a lot that day, they would have more date nights or they would have other ways of connecting. She said, that night I didn't binge because I didn't need that anymore in order to fill my void, because I talked to my husband, because we're actually connecting in a deeper way. So this may actually also align with what Dr. May is talking about on really tuning in with the triggers and what's going on underneath that. But we can use the hidden emotion tool in order to address binge eating as well. And we found that to be effective.